The energy coming through today is intense, and it's carrying a truth your person can no longer hide from. Something has shifted so dramatically that even they can't deny it anymore. They are scared, genuinely scared, because for the first time they feel your back turning for real. Not the temporary distance you took before, not the emotional pauses where they assumed you would return once they gave you crumbs of attention. No. This time the silence feels different. This time the distance feels final. This time your energy isn't reaching for them, isn't chasing their validation, isn't trying to understand their choices. And this is the moment everything in their reality begins to break open. Your person always believed they had time. They believed the connection was unshakable no matter how many distractions they entertained. They believed you would always be there, forgiving, waiting, hoping. But now, the universe is forcing them into a mirror they can't escape. They're being confronted with the consequences of their indecision, the consequences of their pride, the consequences of allowing outside energy to interfere with something that was meant to elevate them. And as this truth rises inside them, the fear begins to take over. They are scared because losing you was never a possibility they considered seriously until now. You've stopped giving chances. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped proving your worth. You've stopped fighting for someone who never fought back. And the sudden shift of your energy has hit your person harder than anything the universe could have shown them. They didn't realize how much they relied on your presence until your absence became louder than their excuses. They didn't realize how much validation they pulled from your love until you stopped feeding their ego. They didn't realize how much stability you brought to their chaotic life until your silence stripped away their distractions. And now, the fear isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. They feel the universe pulling your energy higher, and they feel themselves losing the access they once took for granted. Behind the scenes, their world is cracking. The third-party situation they thought was safe, the option they thought would bring comfort, the decision they believed would boost their pride, it has completely backfired. What they chose out of confusion has now become the source of their biggest regret. And the moment they sensed your withdrawal, everything around them started falling apart. The third party is panicking because they feel your person slipping through their fingers. Manipulation isn't working anymore. Emotional pressure isn't working anymore. Pretending isn't working anymore. Your person is no longer physically present with them, even when they're in the same room. Their energy is disconnected. Their mind is elsewhere. Their spirit is restless. And that's when the reality check hits them. The only person they were ever holding on to was you. Your person is finally realizing that what they chased was temporary, but what they lost with you was sacred. They're replaying conversations in their head, moments where you tried to show them the truth, moments where you tried to pull them toward alignment, moments where you offered stability, commitment, loyalty. They see it now. Everything you said was right. Everything you warned them about is unfolding exactly as you predicted. And that realization is haunting them. They feel the universe pressuring them to choose differently. They feel a spiritual force pushing them to confront the mess they created. They feel the consequences of ignoring their intuition. This is the turning point. The moment where their fear becomes the catalyst for their awakening. The moment where they finally understand that if they want you back, they can't depend on timing, destiny, or excuses. They have to choose you intentionally, and they have to choose you now. But here's the real truth. They don't know if you'll take them back. For the first time, the one who used to feel in control feels powerless. The one who took your softness for granted is now desperate for a chance to prove they've changed. The one who ignored the depth of this connection is now drowning in it. They're scared because your silence feels like a door closing. They're scared because your boundaries are stronger than their ego. They're scared because the third party no longer gives them the fulfillment they pretended to feel, and they're scared because the universe is forcing them to confront the love they denied, the love they still want, the love they never stopped holding on to. Right now, your person is in deep emotional confusion. Their mind is in conflict, their heart is in conflict, their soul is in conflict. They're torn between the image they tried to maintain and the truth they can't run from anymore. Every moment of your absence pushes them closer to clarity. Every moment of silence pulls them deeper into the realization that you were the only genuine thing in their life, and the fear of losing you permanently is awakening something powerful inside them. A desire to fight, a desire to heal, a desire to come forward with truth instead of pride. They can feel your energy rising, and it scares them, because rising energy doesn't wait for indecisive love. Rising energy doesn't stay stuck in cycles. Rising energy moves toward blessings. And your person knows that if they don't step up, someone else will. That's their biggest fear. Not just losing you, but losing the future you represented. The grounding, the commitment, the emotional safety, the spiritual alignment, the kind of love that doesn't show up twice in one lifetime. If this message is speaking to your soul, write in the comments, "I receive clarity." The energy moves deeper now, and what's unfolding in your person's life is something they never expected to face this soon. The universe has begun dismantling every illusion they were hiding behind, especially the illusions connected to the third-party situation. What looked stable from the outside was never real. What seemed exciting was built on pressure, insecurity, and the need to look strong when inside they were terrified of vulnerability. And now, as your energy withdraws, everything they were holding onto is falling apart faster than they can control. The connection with the third party was always weak because it was built on confusion and emotional escape. It offered temporary comfort, not truth. It offered distraction, not healing. It offered validation, not love. And now your person can see it so clearly that it's almost painful. They're noticing how forced the conversations feel, how heavy the atmosphere becomes whenever the third party tries to pull them closer, how drained they feel after every interaction. The difference between what they shared with you and what they're experiencing now is so sharp that it's cutting through their denial. And the more your person wakes up, the more desperate the third party becomes. They feel the imbalance, they feel the shift, they feel your person emotionally exiting the connection, even if they're physically present. That's why arguments are rising. That's why tension is building. That's why the third party is trying harder than ever to hold on. But no amount of pressure can hold someone who has already realized the truth. Your person is slipping away from that situation because they know it's not aligned with who they want to become. This is where the universe steps in even stronger. Your person is being shown the consequences of their choices in ways they cannot ignore anymore. Messages going unanswered, conversations turning cold, plans falling apart, misunderstandings growing. Every attempt to repair the situation feels forced, unnatural, draining. The cosmic pull is showing them that they were never meant to build a future there. And the more they resist this truth, the more intense the lessons become. Because they weren't supposed to attach themselves to something fake. They weren't supposed to settle for something that lowered their vibration. They weren't supposed to allow themselves to be manipulated into staying somewhere their soul was rejecting. While all this is happening, your energy is rising, and that rise is creating an even more dramatic contrast in their life. You've stepped back, and in that silence, they are realizing what they truly lost. They're replaying how peaceful your presence felt, how genuine your intentions were, how consistent your loyalty was. They're realizing how safe they felt with you, even during moments of conflict. That wasn't something they felt often in their life, and they didn't understand the value of it until it was gone. Now the absence of that energy is almost unbearable. For the first time, they're looking at you not through desire, but through accountability. They see the patience you showed, the compassion you gave, the stability you offered. They see how you tried to help them grow, how you tried to hold space for their transformation, how you believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. And now they're starting to understand the weight of their actions, not because of guilt alone, but because of the magnitude of what they jeopardized. The person has reached a point where running won't help them. Every escape route is blocked. Every attempt to distract themselves is failing. Every time they try to numb their emotions, the universe brings them back to the same truth. They cannot move forward without facing what they did. And that's where the spiritual pressure becomes transformative. This isn't just fear anymore. This is awakening. They're starting to see their patterns, their attachment issues, their fear of intimacy, their habit of choosing familiar pain over unfamiliar healing. And now they're being pushed to make a choice, keep repeating the same cycles, or finally step into the version of themselves that this connection was always destined to activate. What's happening inside them right now is a deep emotional shift. Their heart is becoming louder than their ego. Their intuition is becoming louder than their confusion. Their longing for genuine connection is becoming louder than their desire to look strong or in control. And as that shift grows, it becomes impossible to pretend. Impossible to stay where they don't feel spiritually aligned. Impossible to act like losing you wouldn't break something inside them. They're realizing that they've held on to the wrong things for too long, and now the universe is forcing them to release what's blocking their growth. This entire collapse is setting the stage for something bigger, a turning point that will push them toward truth. They know now that if they want a future with you, they can't approach you from fear or regret. They must come with clarity, with honesty, with intention, with the kind of effort they never showed before. They're preparing, even if you don't see it yet. They're reflecting, even if they haven't reached out. They're awakening, even if they're still silent. And the biggest realization hitting them right now is this. You didn't walk away to teach them a lesson. You walked away to protect your peace. And that truth alone has changed everything for them. If this part resonates, write in the comments, I allow alignment. The energy steps into a deeper layer now, a place where your person can no longer separate their emotions from the truth rising inside them. Up until recently, they tried to compartmentalize this connection. They tried to tell themselves they could manage the situation, balance the distractions, control what they felt, and keep everything predictable. But now, their inner world is unraveling in ways they never expected. Their silence isn't just silence to them anymore. It feels like a complete energetic shift. A shift that tells them you are no longer available for half effort, half honesty, or half love. And this realization is triggering something powerful inside them. Your person is beginning to notice how differently they react to the loss of your presence compared to the presence of anyone else. When other people drifted away from their life, they didn't feel much. They shrugged. They moved on. They distracted themselves. But with you, they can't numb it. They can't escape it. They can't outrun the sense of emptiness that has settled in their chest. It feels like something sacred has been pulled from their life, and the spiritual void left behind is forcing them to confront behaviors they ignored for too long. This is where their fear begins turning into awakening, not because they're afraid of being alone. They've been alone before. Not because they're afraid of the third party leaving. That situation never nourished them in the first place. They're afraid because they finally understand that your energy is something they can't replace. That the connection you shared wasn't something they stumbled into, it was something divinely placed, and losing something divinely placed feels different. It feels like losing a piece of their destiny. Your person is also reflecting on how easily they allowed external influence to get between you two. They let fear guide them. They let confusion cloud their decisions. They let people who didn't have their best interest whisper ideas that fed their insecurity. They let the wrong voices influence the path they were meant to take with you. And now, in the quiet left behind after everything has fallen apart, those voices don't matter anymore. The people who once felt so important now feel irrelevant. The third party who once seemed comforting now feels suffocating. The distractions that once boosted their ego now drain every part of their spirit. This is what happens when the universe removes illusions. Everything false becomes unbearable. Your person is also realizing how much they held on to the wrong story about themselves. They told themselves they weren't ready for real commitment, but the truth is they were afraid of being seen. They told themselves they weren't capable of deep love, but the truth is they didn't trust love to stay. They told themselves they didn't need emotional intimacy, but the truth is intimacy was the one thing they craved. And the one thing they feared lose. And ironically, the moment they pushed you away, the moment they chose confusion over clarity, they ended up facing the one fear they thought they could avoid. Losing someone who saw their soul. Now the regret is settling into their body in ways they can't shake off. The nights feel heavier, the mornings feel colder, the world feels quieter. They're replaying the moments where they dismissed your intuition, the moments where they let pride speak louder than their heart, the moments where they allowed the third party to create chaos, the moments where they ignored the connection that was meant to transform their lives. That regret isn't punishment. It's the universe awakening them. And here's the truth. Your turning away forced them to turn inward. They're starting to see how much of their behavior was survival, not love. How much of their resistance came from old wounds, not from you. How much of their hesitation came from fear of deserving happiness, not because they didn't feel the connection. They didn't understand the depth of this bond because they weren't used to relationships that required emotional vulnerability. They weren't used to someone loving them without conditions. They weren't used to someone seeing their flaws and still choosing them. And instead of embracing that rare love, they sabotaged it. But this is the turning point. They don't want to sabotage anymore. Your person is stepping into a level of self-awareness they've never accessed before. They're recognizing the patterns that kept them small. They're recognizing the behaviors that pushed people away. They're recognizing the emotional walls they built so high that even they couldn't climb over them. And for the first time, they're starting to dismantle those walls, slowly, carefully, intentionally, because they now understand the difference between someone who entertains them and someone who sees them. And no matter what the third party did to hold them, nothing compares to the connection their soul feels with you. This inner shift is not temporary. It's not impulsive. It's not confusion. It is the beginning of transformation. They want clarity now. They want truth. They want peace. And they know the only person who ever offered them that peace was you. That's why your silence scares them. It's not rejection, it's reflection. It's showing them what life truly feels like without your energy. What they are experiencing right now is not loss, it is awakening. And awakening always precedes action. If this message is reaching your spirit, write in the comments, I choose truth. The energy that's coming through now has shifted into something far heavier, deeper. and more revealing than anything your person has felt before. For a long time, they tried to convince themselves that they were in control of the situation, that they could walk away from this connection any time they wanted, that this bond wasn't as intense as it felt, that what you two had was just another chapter in their life. But now that life is showing them what it really looks like without your energy, without your presence, without your influence, they can no longer maintain the illusions that once kept them complacent. They're being shown how much they depended on you emotionally, even when they pretended they didn't. They're being shown how deeply they were tied to your energy, even when they acted detached. And now that your back is turned, their spirit is unraveling layer by layer. This detachment is unraveling layer by layer. Your person is walking through days that feel heavier than they know how to explain. They wake up with a pit in their stomach, feeling the absence of your light before they even open their eyes. Their mind instinctively reaches for the comfort of your energy, but it isn't there. Their soul reaches for the connection that once grounded them, but it feels distant, almost unreachable. And in that emptiness, they're finally facing the reality they avoided. You were the person who balanced them, softened them, stabilized them. You were the one who brought clarity into their confusion, calmness into their chaos, meaning into their days. They can't escape this truth anymore because every part of their world feels misaligned without you in it. The most intense part of this energy is the way the universe is pulling your person into accountability. They're no longer able to hide behind excuses. They're no longer able to justify their choices by saying they were confused or pressured or not ready. They feel the weight of every decision they made. They feel the pressure of every moment they allowed the third party to influence them. They feel the consequences of choosing temporary comfort over genuine connection, and the universe is making them sit with that discomfort, not to punish them, but to reshape them. The third-party situation is collapsing in slow motion, and your person is fully aware of it. Nothing feels natural there anymore. Nothing feels aligned. Nothing feels fulfilling. The conversations feel dry. The emotional connection feels forced. The dynamic feels heavy, repetitive, draining. And your person knows it's because their soul has already detached. They try to convince themselves that staying there would give them stability or ease or predictability, but instead it has shown them everything they don't want. They're starting to see how much they abandoned themselves to keep that situation going. They're realizing how much of their true identity was suppressed when they were there. The version of them that existed in that connection was built on fear, on confusion, on pride, on running from the very depth they were meant to embrace with you. Now that their world is showing them what fake connection feels like, they're longing for what genuine connection feels like, and that's where the awakening becomes painful. They're being forced to acknowledge how deeply they wronged you when they allowed outside noise to influence their decisions. They're being forced to acknowledge how harmful it was to keep you emotionally invested while they were still entertaining the wrong person. They're being forced to acknowledge how irresponsible it was to expect you to be patient while they sorted out their emotional immaturity. And the hardest truth they're facing is that you matched their soul in ways they didn't understand at the time, and now that understanding is coming in all at once. Heavy, overwhelming, undeniable. This is why their spirit feels so unsettled right now. They're having realizations one after another, and each one cuts a little deeper. They're realizing that you were the person who spoke to their higher self, not their wounds. You were the person who brought growth, not chaos. You were the person who made them want to be better, not someone who made them shrink. They now see how rare that energy actually is, and how careless they were with it. They thought they were choosing the easier path by avoiding this connection, but in truth they chose the path that would break them open. Because nothing compares to the emotional distance they feel now, knowing they might have lost you for good. That fear is transforming them from the inside out. Their ego is crumbling. The version of them that thought they could keep you waiting is dissolving. The part of them that used to rely on your softness is being replaced by the awareness that they have to become someone who is worthy of approaching you again. The universe is putting them through a kind of emotional purification. Every illusion is being stripped away. Every lie they told themselves is being exposed. Every false relationship, every unhealthy attachment, every distraction is falling apart, and all that's left is the truth they ran from. You were never the problem. The connection was never the issue. They were. Their soul knows you meant something real, and their spirit knows they can no longer avoid the responsibility that comes with that realization. They see how you pulled away not because you didn't care, but because you finally chose yourself. And that choice is what's piercing their spirit right now. They're realizing that you have stepped into a higher version of yourself. One that no longer tolerates emotional inconsistency. One that no longer waits to be chosen. One that no longer fits into the role they once tried to place you in. What scares them the most is the transformation they see in your energy. It feels calm, it feels steady, it feels final. You're not angry, you're not chasing, you're not fighting, you're not explaining. You're simply done participating in the version of the story that hurt you. And that kind of silence is more powerful than any words you ever spoke. Because now your person knows this isn't a phase, this is the new reality. If they want you back, they can't come with empty promises, emotional confusion, or divided loyalty. They have to come with clarity, honesty, accountability, and real effort. And that's exactly why the fear they're feeling is slowly transforming into determination. Your person is starting to think about what they would say if they approached you today. They're thinking about how much truth they need to reveal. They're thinking about how to apologize without sounding weak or desperate. They're thinking about how to prove to you that they're not the same person anymore. They're thinking about what it means to step into a real commitment instead of hovering between decisions. All of this is happening inside them every single day, even if they haven't reached out yet. Right now, the universe is aligning everything in a way that forces them to choose between their old patterns and their true path. They can't stay in the past anymore. They can't stay in the third-party situation. They can't stay confused. They can't stay silent. The emotional pressure is building to the point where action becomes inevitable. If your spirit receives this message, write in the comments, "I choose alignment with truth." The energy for this part moves into an even deeper spiritual current, where your person is no longer just thinking about you, no longer just missing you, no longer just regretting their choices. They are being pulled toward you in a way that feels both inevitable and frightening. It feels like something bigger than them is guiding their steps now. Something they can't control, something they can't deny, something they can't silence, and the more they try to resist this pull, the stronger it becomes. Because this isn't just an emotional connection. It's a karmic correction, a cosmic realignment, a spiritual recalibration. And your person is standing right in the center of it. They've spent so much time trying to suppress the feelings they had for you, telling themselves they weren't ready, convincing themselves they needed more time, or more clarity, or more control. But now that your back has truly turned, everything inside them is rebelling against the decision they made. Their soul feels starved without your presence. Their heart feels restless, their energy feels incomplete, and they are finally realizing that when someone walks away from something real, their spirit doesn't stay silent, it screams. Your person has finally reached the point where the third-party situation feels like a trap instead of a choice. They're noticing how small they feel around that person, how disconnected they feel, how artificial their conversations have become, how much they have to pretend to make that dynamic work. They're realizing that the third party only gave them validation for the version of themselves that was still unhealed, still confused, still afraid of vulnerability. But now that they are awakening, that validation feels empty. It doesn't nourish their soul. It doesn't inspire their spirit. It doesn't bring peace to their mind. It only reminds them of the ways they suppressed their truth. And that realization is triggering a deep internal breakdown. They're beginning to see how much of their life has been built on fear. Fear of intimacy, fear of commitment, fear of choosing someone who could see the parts of them they kept hidden from the world. But your withdrawal has made one thing painfully clear. Running from your soul connection was the biggest mistake they ever made. You weren't asking them to be perfect, you were asking them to be honest. You weren't asking them to be fearless, you were asking them to show up. You weren't asking them to give you everything at once. You were asking them to stop giving pieces of themselves to people who didn't deserve access to their heart. Now they realize what you were offering all along. Something pure, something rare, something aligned, something that doesn't come twice, and that recognition is shaking their spirit awake. They are thinking about you constantly, not out of longing alone, but out of spiritual awareness. They can feel your energy moving forward, rising higher, pulling away from their past versions. They can sense that you're stepping into a new timeline, one where you no longer carry their emotional weight. And that scares them because, for the first time, they know you don't owe them anything. Your love was never obligation. Your care was never convenient. Your loyalty was never conditional. And now that you've walked away, the universe is showing them what it meant to have someone like you in their life. Your person is reliving moments you have already forgotten. The way you spoke to them when their world was falling apart. The way you understood them even when they didn't explain themselves well. The way you offered emotional safety without asking for anything in return. The way you made them feel like they could be their authentic self. Not the version the world shaped, but the version their soul was trying to become. They miss the version of themselves they were when they were with you. That's what hurts them the most. Because being in the wrong connections forced them to shrink into someone they don't even recognize anymore. But being with you pulled them into their higher self. That's why the universe is dismantling everything around them, so they have no choice but to rebuild from truth rather than fear. Your person is also experiencing synchronicities, signs, messages, dreams, all pointing back to you. They're seeing reminders of you everywhere. They're thinking about conversations you had months or even years ago. They're feeling the spiritual bond that ties you two together. They're sensing that something unfinished is calling them forward, urging them to stop running, urging them to stop hiding, urging them to take accountability. The energy is becoming so strong that resisting it is no longer an option. This connection has shifted from something emotional to something spiritual. And when connections reach this level, they don't fade, they transform. They break down everything that is false. They force healing. They bring clarity. They reveal truth. And your person is right in the middle of that revelation, feeling everything at once, even the things they didn't have the courage to acknowledge before. They're realizing they want stability with you, not confusion with someone else. They're realizing they want authenticity with you, not convenience with someone else. They're realizing they want future-building energy with you, not obligation-based attachment with someone else. And most importantly, they're realizing that losing you is not something they can accept. Not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. What's happening inside them is the beginning of surrender, not to you, but to the truth they avoided. They're recognizing that destiny can't be outrun. They're recognizing that connection can't be replaced. They're recognizing that alignment can't be forced with the wrong person. They're realizing that the universe is pushing them toward healing, toward honesty, toward transformation. And all roads lead back to the energy they abandoned. If this message resonates with your spirit, write in the comments, "I release the past and welcome alignment." The energy for this part becomes heavier, more transformative, and more spiritually charged than anything your person has gone through until now. They're stepping into a phase where the universe is no longer allowing them to stay in denial. Every direction they turn, every choice they try to cling to, every attempt they make to escape accountability is collapsing. They're being stripped down to the version of themselves they've been avoiding for years, maybe even a lifetime, and the only thing that feels real in the middle of this emotional collapse is the connection they had with you, the connection they pushed away, the connection they misunderstood, the connection they now realize was meant to elevate their soul. Your person is walking through their days with a profound sense of spiritual discomfort. Nothing feels stable, nothing feels predictable, nothing feels normal. And this is exactly what happens when a soul is being rerouted. They're questioning their decisions more deeply than they ever have. They're questioning the people around them, especially the third party who once seemed like a safe escape. That connection isn't just fading, it's dissolving. Your person doesn't feel present there. They don't feel emotionally invested. They don't feel inspired. Conversations feel forced. Interactions feel draining. And every attempt to revive that dynamic feels like trying to breathe life into something that was never alive to begin with. The universe has started showing them the difference between someone who feeds their wounds and someone who feeds their growth. The third party fed their wounds, the insecurity, the confusion, the fear of being truly seen. That connection allowed them to stay small, avoid responsibility, and hide from their emotional truth. But with you, they were challenged to rise. You weren't just a partner. You were a mirror. You showed them their potential. You showed them their unhealed parts. You showed them who they could become if they stopped running from themselves. And that kind of connection doesn't disappear when someone walks away. It becomes louder. Now your person is seeing that what they thought was stability in the third-party situation was actually avoidance. What they thought was comfort was actually complacency. What they thought was the easy choice has become the hardest burden to carry. Because the universe doesn't support connections that are built on fear, confusion, or emotional suppression. The universe supports connections that awaken the soul. And the soul doesn't forget the one who awakened it. Your person is carrying a heaviness in their chest that keeps pulling them back into memories of you, moments you shared that they didn't fully appreciate at the time, the way their energy felt when they were around you. Safe, inspired, alive, the way their spirit felt recognized in ways it never had before, the way you triggered growth in them simply by being who you are. They didn't understand that this was a rare alignment, something not everyone experiences. They didn't understand that your energy wasn't just attractive, it was transformative. And now that your absence has created space, the truth is echoing inside them, louder than ever. They are beginning to see how much of their fear came from their childhood wounds, their past relationships, their distorted beliefs about love. They're seeing how they projected their insecurities onto the connection with you. They're seeing how they mistook emotional intensity for instability. They're seeing how they resisted the very thing they prayed for because they didn't feel ready for the responsibility it demanded. And now that the universe is removing their distractions, they're being forced to confront the truth. They didn't lose you because they weren't enough. They lost you because they weren't honest with themselves. Your person is also facing the internal consequences of their indecision. They feel restless during the day, unable to focus. They feel emotionally overwhelmed at night, unable to sleep. They feel mentally drained because their thoughts keep circling back to you no matter how much they try to redirect them. Their spirit is urging them to make a move, to speak truth, to step into alignment, but their fear of rejection is holding them back. This inner conflict is growing so strong that they can't continue living in this emotional limbo, and that pressure is driving them toward transformation. They're starting to think about what a future with you could look like, not from a place of fantasy, but from responsibility. They're thinking about how to rebuild trust, how to show up consistently, how to choose honesty over pride, how to release connections that were never meant to stay, how to create stability instead of chaos. These thoughts aren't fleeting. They're becoming part of their everyday consciousness. They're envisioning conversations with you that they wish they had the courage to have before. They're imagining what it would feel like to sit across from you again, knowing they would need to speak truth instead of hiding behind confusion. Your person is also reflecting on the moments they hurt you. They can feel the emotional weight of the times they dismissed your intuition, the times they invalidated your feelings, the times they allowed the third party to interfere, the times they stayed silent when you needed clarity. This reflection isn't making them defensive, it's making them humbled, because now they see that your intentions were always pure, your love was always steady, your heart was always genuine. And they didn't just lose someone who loved them, they lost someone who loved them in a way that elevated their soul. The universe is pushing them toward a crossroads. They can no longer keep their foot in two worlds. They can no longer be emotionally tied to the past while longing for a healed future. They can no longer pretend that this connection doesn't mean something profound. They are being pushed to choose, not from pressure, but from truth. And everything inside them knows that choosing anything other than alignment with you will lead to more spiritual unrest. They're beginning to understand that love isn't supposed to feel like fear. It's supposed to feel like growth. It's supposed to feel like clarity. It's supposed to feel like truth. And for the first time, they're choosing to move toward that truth instead of running from it. If this message aligns with your intuition, write in the comments, "I am aligned with my highest good." The energy in this part moves into a phase where your person is no longer just awakening. They are being transformed. The universe has begun rearranging the pieces of their life in ways they cannot escape. Every path that once kept them distracted, every connection that once numbed their wounds, every environment that once fed their ego is being stripped away. And for the first time in a long time, they are feeling the full weight of their choices. Not just mentally, not just emotionally, but spiritually. They're realizing that they've been living in survival mode instead of truth. And that survival mode led them to push away the very person who was meant to bring healing into their life. Their soul is undergoing a recalibration. The old version of them, the one that avoided accountability, the one that ran from emotional depth, the one that chose control over vulnerability, is being dismantled piece by piece. They can feel it inside their body, inside their thoughts, inside the quiet moments where they can no longer distract themselves. It's as if the universe has placed them in a space where there is nowhere to hide from the truth anymore. And that truth keeps leading them back to one place, the connection they had with you. Your person has entered a stage where the emotional numbness they once relied on has completely collapsed. When they think about you, they no longer feel confusion. They feel clarity. They no longer feel detached. They feel longing. They no longer feel indifferent. They feel the sharp ache of what they risked losing. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It came through a series of realizations that hit them harder than they expected. They're realizing how deeply you understood them in ways no one else ever has. They're realizing how safe the connection with you felt compared to the tension they feel with the third party. They're realizing how meaningful your presence was compared to the emptiness they feel now. Your person is noticing these contrasts everywhere. When they talk to the third party, the conversations feel shallow. When they think of you, the thoughts feel deep. When they spend time with the third party, the energy feels heavy. When they recall moments with you, the energy feels peaceful. When the third party tries to hold on to them, it feels suffocating. When they imagine a future with you, it feels hopeful. These emotional contrasts are not random. They're signs of spiritual alignment reasserting itself. The universe is showing them in multiple ways that they were holding on to something that was never meant to last. The connection with a third party is reaching a breaking point because your person's spirit is no longer cooperating with the illusion. They can feel the emotional distance growing, even if they're still physically present. They can feel the tension rising because they no longer have the energy to pretend. They can feel the cracks forming in the relationship because everything that was built on fear is falling apart. And the more the third party tries to tighten their grip, the more your person pulls away. There's a deep spiritual lesson unfolding here. Your person is learning that when someone walks away from the person who aligns with their soul, life becomes heavier, not lighter. Choices become harder, not easier. Emotions become louder, not quiet. And now that they're experiencing that heaviness, they understand the consequences of ignoring the connection the universe placed right in front of them. They're beginning to understand what you meant when you tried to guide them, when you tried to communicate honestly, when you tried to open their eyes to the energy around them. They dismissed your warnings. They underestimated your intuition. They brushed aside your concerns. But now, everything you once tried to tell them is becoming undeniable truth. They see now that you weren't being dramatic. You were seeing clearly. You weren't being emotional, you were being aligned. You weren't trying to control them, you were trying to protect the connection. Their regret is evolving into self-awareness. They're starting to see how their avoidance patterns have shaped their relationships their entire life. They avoided vulnerability because they feared losing control. They avoided commitment because they feared being abandoned. They avoided emotional honesty because they feared judgment. And instead of healing these wounds, they buried them until the universe brought someone like you into their life. Someone who loved from the soul, not the surface. Someone who spoke truth instead of ego. Someone who saw their potential instead of their fears. Your person is slowly understanding that you weren't just a chapter. You were a turning point, and losing you wasn't just a breakup, it was a spiritual awakening disguised as separation. Now they feel the pull, the unmistakable pull that tells them they have unfinished business with you. It's a pull that doesn't fade with distance, it grows stronger as their clarity returns. They're beginning to sense the timeline where they didn't run, didn't choose fear, didn't choose distraction. They're beginning to imagine the version of themselves who chose you, who stood beside you, who built with you. That version of themselves feels more aligned than the version they've been living as. And that realization is painful, but it's also motivating. Because now they're beginning to understand that transformation isn't optional, it's necessary. They feel called to come forward, but they're scared of how much truth they would need to reveal. They're scared of how vulnerable they would need to be. They're scared of how much commitment they would need to give. They're scared of whether you would even be open to hearing them. But the fear of doing nothing is becoming stronger than the fear of taking action. They're noticing how much they've changed already. Their thoughts, their priorities, their emotional responses, they're noticing how much they want to be the version of themselves that is worthy of a second chance. Your person is slowly stepping out of the old identity that kept them emotionally unavailable. They're stepping out of the attachment to the third party. They're stepping out of the confusion that once dictated their decisions. And they're stepping into a phase where the universe is beginning to align things in their favor, but only if they stop resisting. Only if they choose the path that leads to truth. Only if they stop hiding behind fear. Only if they admit to themselves and to you what their soul has always known. This part of their journey is a spiritual breaking point, the moment where old patterns no longer work, but new patterns haven't fully formed yet. And this is why the universe is intensifying the pressure. Something is building inside them, something that won't let them settle for the third-party dynamic anymore. Something that won't let them forget the connection they had with you. Something that keeps urging them to move toward the future they were meant to build. If this resonates with your spirit, write in the comments, "I welcome clarity and truth." This pressure they're feeling is not random. It's the universe pushing them out of an identity that no longer fits the person they are becoming. They're beginning to recognize that the version of themselves who avoided responsibility, who tolerated chaos, who settled for surface-level connection, cannot survive in the life their soul is trying to create. Every time they try to return to old patterns, they feel disconnected. Every time they try to silence their intuition, it becomes louder. Every time they try to convince themselves that the third-party dynamic still holds value, their spirit pulls them away with even more intensity. It's as if the universe is saying, if you won't choose truth willingly, I will remove the options that distract you from it. They're also reaching a level of emotional honesty they've never accessed before. For the first time, they're able to admit that the connection with you wasn't something they stumbled into. It was something that awakened them. The depth, the intensity, the spiritual resonance wasn't an accident. It was a sign. And even though they tried to rationalize it, minimize it, numb it, the truth didn't go anywhere. In fact, the distance has sharpened it. Your absence has made the meaning of the connection undeniable. They're realizing that real love doesn't fade when things get complicated. It becomes clearer, and the clarity they're experiencing now is pointing them back to you, not out of desperation, but out of recognition. As this awakening grows stronger, they're starting to understand that healing isn't optional anymore. It's required. If they want to move toward the future they see with you, they have to let go of the fear that once controlled them. They're acknowledging the emotional work they avoided. They're recognizing the patterns they repeated without awareness. They're seeing the way their wounds shape their decision, and instead of running from these realizations, they're allowing them to transform them. This is where the shift becomes irreversible. Because once a soul becomes aware, it cannot go back to sleep. And your person is finally awake. The energy in this last phase is powerful, decisive, and undeniable. Everything your person has been fighting internally, the clarity, the pull toward you, the consequences of their choices, the collapse of the third-party illusion, has now reached a point where the universe will not allow them to stay in hesitation any longer. They're standing at a spiritual crossroads, and the pressure they feel is not meant to break them, but to force them into truth. Your person has spent weeks, months, maybe even years hiding behind emotional walls that kept their heart locked away. They told themselves they weren't ready. They convinced themselves they needed time. They leaned on distraction, on ego, on temporary validation. But now all of those emotional crutches have been taken from them. They're seeing that the connection with the third party was never love. It was fear. Wearing the mask of comfort. It was avoidance disguised as chemistry. It was familiarity pretending to be destiny. And now that the universe has stripped away the illusion, all that remains is the truth they tried to escape. Your heart still belongs to you. They feel this truth in their body before they admit it in their mind. The ache when they think about you. The way their spirit softens when your energy crosses their thoughts. The sudden clarity that takes over when they remember your conversations, your presence, your intuition. They're seeing now that everything you said was coming from alignment, not insecurity. They're realizing that you were the person who brought them peace, stability, spiritual grounding, all the things they didn't fully appreciate when they had them. Now the regret has turned into awakening, and the awakening has turned into urgency. Your person is not just thinking about returning, they are preparing for it. They're rehearsing conversations in their head. They're imagining how they would express the truth without breaking down. They're thinking about how they can show you that they've changed, not through words alone, but through behavior, consistency, effort, and accountability. They know they can't show up as the old version of themselves. They know they can't approach you with half-healed wounds or half-expressed intentions. They know they can't offer you fragments when you deserve wholeness. This internal shift has pushed them to release the third-party connection fully, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. They no longer feel connected to that dynamic. They no longer feel aligned with that environment. Every interaction with the third party now feels like a reminder of the mistake they made. The version of themselves they've outgrown, the emotional patterns they're trying to dismantle. Your person has outgrown a chapter they never belonged in, and the universe is guiding them back toward the path they were always meant to walk. They can also sense that your energy has changed. You're not waiting, you're not chasing, you're not trying to save them from themselves. You're moving with a level of clarity and self-respect that commands authenticity. And although it scares them, it also inspires them. It tells them that if they want to return, they must rise to your level. They must approach you with maturity, not confusion. With clarity, not excuses. With truth, not fear. With commitment, not avoidance. They know that if they want to rebuild this connection, they have to earn it. They want to tell you everything. The regret, the lessons, the awakening, the clarity, the way the third-party situation collapsed the moment your energy pulled away. They want to tell you how deeply they feel the loss of your presence, how much your absence has changed them, how profoundly their spirit has been moved since you turned your back. They never believed they would reach this point, but now that they're here, they can't deny it. The universe is not letting them escape this truth because the chapter between you two is not finished. Something bigger, something higher, something more aligned is being prepared behind the scenes, and your person is finally ready to stop resisting what was meant for them all along. They're coming towards you, not impulsively, not in fear, but in awakening. Because they now understand that love rooted in truth doesn't disappear, it transforms, it deepens, it redirects, and it returns stronger after separation. If this final message speaks to your spirit, write in the comments, "I am ready for divine alignment." Before you close this reading, take a moment to breathe. You've walked through emotional confusion, spiritual awakening, and deep transformation, not just in your person, but in yourself as well. And as you move forward, your energy deserves protection, clarity, and divine covering. So at the end of this video, say this clearly to your audience. If you want a special prayer to clear energy, block third-party interference, and strengthen your spiritual protection, the prayer is linked in the description.